Hello, and welcome to the first episode of installing Gentoo Linux. So, for those of you that have been following along, last time we completed season 2 of Celeste, which is a video game. Gentoo Linux is not a video game, it is a operating system for the computer, much like Windows or OS X. So, before we get started with doing the installation, you might be wondering to yourself, why would I want to install Gentoo Linux? Actually, you probably don't. Although I'm not going to say it's super hard, it is a little bit challenging. And if you've never messed around with Linux before, Gentoo is one that requires a little bit more preparation and setup, but ultimately I think is very rewarding. So, why am I putting this stream together in this series of videos? Well, I'm a big fan of Linux in general and Gentoo specifically. And so I just wanted to share this with anybody who might be interested in doing such an installation. And even if you wanted to go with something that's a little bit easier to install, like maybe Ubuntu, this could still be helpful for you and teach you a few things. So, again, why Gentoo? And what is Gentoo? What is Linux? Um, well, at the end of the day, a computer is nothing more than a bunch of hardware. And what the operating system does is it puts together that hardware in such a way that programmers can write programs to use the hardware in useful ways. For example, like drawing something on a screen. One of the more popular, if not the most popular operating systems is Windows. And one of the things that makes it so popular is that it's compatible with pretty much any hardware combination out there right out of the box. It just works. Trademark. Linux is a competitor to Windows, and it's free, unlike Windows, and it's also open source, unlike Windows. Open source meaning that every bit of code that is used in this operating system is available to anybody. You can read it, you can modify it, you can redistribute it if you wish. In the Linux, so Linux itself is actually just a kernel, which is like the brain, I would almost say, of an operating system. It's the layer between the hardware and user land, or what you and I interact with on a daily basis. And there are many different distributions of Linux that use that kernel and then wrap different functionality around it to give you an operating system. Gentoo is one of these distributions. One of probably the most popular uh, Linux distribution is Ubuntu. It's a lot more beginner friendly, and it's a much more of a it just works trademark type of operating system compared to Gentoo. So what is Gentoo? Well, this is the homepage, www.gentoo.org, and it describes itself as a highly flexible, source-based Linux distribution. So probably the key phrase here is source-based. So almost every distribution out there, and especially in Windows, if you want a new piece of software, a new program, let's say you wanted to install Firefox on your operating system. Let's say you wanted to install a calculator. What you're going to do is go to probably the programmer's website, and you're going to download what's called a precompiled binary. All right, I'm not going to get into the specifics of what that means. I guess not right now, maybe. But essentially, when somebody writes code, they write it in some programming language, and ultimately, that programming language needs to get turned into a bunch of zeros and ones. That's what the computer understands, and that's what the programmer does for you, and they'll put it on their website for you to download and use. What Gentoo does is uh, it takes one step back in that process. So rather than relying on the programmer themselves to compile the program, it's going to download the source code. So automatically it means that it can only install, open sourced applications. Actually, that's not true. I guess Gentoo can also install binaries, but I guess that's a detail that maybe we'll get into a little bit later. It'll download the source code, and then it'll compile it specific to your system. So I'm going to click here on Learn More. I'm not going to read the whole website to you. But here under What is Gentoo, one of the things that it mentions here is that performance is one of the things that people like about it. And what they mean by that is, uh, especially on something like Ubuntu, if I go and install one piece of software, it's gonna it's gonna compile that software with all the bells and whistles, every bit of functionality that it could possibly uh, have, because they don't know which user is going to need it, right? So does it need to have Bluetooth capabilities? Does it need to have Wi-Fi? Does it need to be compatible with an infrared remote? In Gentoo, you get to choose which features of a piece of software you want to install with it. Uh, a lot of people like that. One of the reasons that's nice is, for example, if you have a computer that doesn't have a Wi-Fi card, there's no need for you to have a whole bunch of Wi-Fi programs on there or dependencies. It's just going to install a bunch of stuff that you don't need. So that's one of the things. Another, like, a lot of people like to think that if you compile your own programs, they're going to be faster. It's going to run better. That's probably technically true. Uh, but really, with nowadays with so many 4-core, 8-core processors and 8 GB, 16 GB, 32 GB RAM, what have you, I think this becomes actually less of an issue. Honestly, I really think the main thing that draws me to Gentoo is the configurability and the top-notch user and developer community. And when they say top-notch community, I mean it really is. Okay, the wiki, the homepage, and all this is extremely helpful. We're going to use the handbook in this series to do the installation. We'll see it's very detailed, but also very approachable, and it gives you everything that you need to really do this installation, despite being, again, a little bit complex. And then again, with the configurability, one of the things that frustrated me, earlier in my Linux experience, is if I ran into an issue that I couldn't resolve, and I tried to troubleshoot what was going on, I had a hard time with some of these other distributions figuring out, what was going on in the background. Whether this was some sort of pre-configured thingy, or whether this is just an actual bug in the software. Uh, and what drew me to Gentoo is that, you literally build this from the ground up yourself. Every piece of software installed on the operating system you put there, almost everyone, but yeah, pretty much everyone. And so because of that, again, it takes a little bit longer to set up, but when there is an issue, I have a little bit of a better basis in trying to track down what's going on and troubleshoot. So I guess that's 8 minutes of 90 minutes of introduction there. I think we're just gonna go ahead and jump right in. This is a live stream, okay? I didn't take down notes. I did think about it a little bit, but this is just gonna happen, y'all, and we're just gonna see how it goes. I'm gonna be flipping back and forth between this browser here, where we're gonna have the handbook open, and then the actual installation we're gonna be doing in a virtual machine. Uh, And so that virtual machine is a blank slate right now. So I have, I think, a 40 GB hard drive on it, and that's it, and maybe 8 GB of RAM. So for anybody who wants to follow along, this should be a pretty good starting point. So gentoo.org is a great starting point. That's the main website for Gentoo. If you come here to downloads, am I talking to myself? Should I double check to make sure the sound's working? Oh yeah, it's definitely working. So the way we're gonna do this, so Gentoo again, not the easiest thing to install. Not impossible either though. You just gotta pay attention. We're gonna install it using what's called the minimum installation CD. So you're gonna want to download that right there. I've already got it downloaded. There's other ways to do this installation. In fact, there's, probably honestly one of the easier ways to do it is Uh, Download someone else's live CD, like maybe Ubuntu's live CD, and boot into that, and then get one of these stage threes. And the reason I say that is the Gentoo minimal installation CD, it's all text based. So if you like, clicking on things, you're not gonna do that in here. Uh, the Ubuntu. Okay, in case you don't know what a live CD is, this is like in the old days when, like, even back with the Windows days. I don't. I wasn't around in the floppy days, but CDs and DVDs. When you wanted to install it, they would put it on a CD. You put the CD in the drive, and now when you reboot your computer, rather than starting up whatever's on the hard drive, well, heck, the hard drive might be empty, so there's nothing there to start up. It looks on the CD or the DVD, and it tries to. You can actually put an operating system on the CD. Okay, so now you're booting up the operating system that's on that CD, and that's what you're going into. So that's pretty much how every Linux distribution does their installations. You can actually put it on a thumb drive too, if you don't have a CD drive. If you're doing it in a virtual machine, you can just mount the ISO. That's the type of file that downloads here. But anyways, we're gonna go through what to do with that ISO. But for now, probably go ahead and download that. Now, if we scroll down and we're wondering to ourselves, what? Okay, like what's going on? What do I do with these files? We're gonna go right here and click on the Gentoo Handbook. The Gentoo Handbook is your friend. I'm here to tell you everything you need to know to install this operating system successfully is found in here. You can see it's been translated into lots of languages for your viewing pleasure. All right. I'm not going to read this handbook to you word for word. That would not make for an interesting stream. I'm here to tell you, it will not. I'm gonna highlight certain things. I kind of glanced through it. I haven't actually done an installation probably in a year, I think. Maybe a little bit less. I installed it on this laptop, I think earlier this year. But I kind of skimmed through it then too. But I'm gonna try to point out, some of the important things. And like for example, one of the first things that you're gonna want to understand is which of these handbooks to use, and it's gonna be based on what type of processor you have in your computer. If you're just a normal person, you're probably gonna be doing this AMD 64 right here. Okay. If you're fancy, you might need one of these other ones. I used to use this one, x86. This was back in the olden days, the early or the mid to late 2000s is when I started Linux. But nowadays, everything is 64-bit pretty much, and so we're gonna use the AMD 64 handbook. All right. I highly recommend when you're doing your own installation, actually reading everything in the handbook. Um, it's got good information. You don't have to do every single thing that it says, and it's gonna tell you the parts that are optional. But if you're coming into this with zero experience or minimal experience with Linux, um, rely on the handbook. It has almost all the information you need. In fact, let me see. It has a little snippet in here. Let's see if I can find it. All right, this is kind of the table of contents. Uh, I'm gonna click on about the Gentoo Linux installation. I believe it's pronounced Gentoo. All right. I used to pronounce it Gentoo in my head, but I'm almost 100% sure that's wrong. There's a snippet in here. I'm gonna look it up. Yeah, here it is. I'm gonna read this paragraph. It's really short. It is very important that everyone understands that choices are what makes Gentoo run. We try not to force users into anything they do not like. If anyone believes otherwise, please file a bug report. So what they're saying is you don't have to do anything you don't want to when you're doing this installation. And if this handbook, if you find anything written in it that suggests that you have to, that's a bug, file a bug report. This kind of gives you the breakdown of how the chapters are laid out. Let's go ahead and jump into chapter one. The user is in a working environment ready to install Gentoo. I think we might be skipping that step actually. I think I might have done that already. Install options, troubles. All right, let's see. Choosing the media. So here's where they talk about whether you want to use the installation CD. Sometimes they'll make a live DVD. It's going to talk to you in here about that. Um, I pretty much got the impression that you want to avoid that though. But hey, it's your choice. Do what you want. What are the stages? Yeah, it'll walk you through that as well. Let's see, burning a disk, booting. Okay, all this stuff I've already done, but that file that we downloaded earlier, this chapter 1 is going to tell you what to do with that file. Okay, and even if you're not like if you're on a Windows machine now, it'll kind of walk you through how to take that file, put it on a DVD, etc. It might even go in how to put it on a thumb drive if you need to. All right, booting the installation media. Once the media is ready, it is time to boot it. Insert the media in the system, reboot, and enter the motherboard's firmware user interface. Blah, blah, blah. I recommend you read all of this. All right, this is where we are already. At the boot prompt, users get the option of displaying available kernels. I'm going to go with just the default option, but again, Gentoo is about choices. You can do fancy stuff here if you want. All right, but why don't we go ahead and flip over, see if I can change scenes here. Can you see that? Yes, you can. So this is the first thing you're going to see when you put in the CD or the DVD or what have you, and you boot up, assuming you can get your BIOS to boot from the CD rather than the hard drive. Again, it's all in the handbook. I recommend you read it. This is asking you, what do you want to do? Oh, and if you don't do anything, it's just going to boot your regular operating system. Okay, so if you move the mouse, then it'll stay here, or the keys rather. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the first one and hit enter. And this is going to load up. Here we go. What are all these things? You can skip this step, and in fact, if you type in nothing, it'll automatically do this for you. Oh man, I should have hit enter. I don't want the default. Okay, let's see if it took my input or not. Essentially, that was asking me to enter the keyboard layout that you want to use. Yeah, so this is just a regular QWERTY keyboard. I actually don't like QWERTY. I use Dvorak. So I'm gonna see if I can get this thing to reboot, and let's try to select the other one. This might error out. I might have to kill it from my end. No, here we go. Reboot. Very nice. All right, going back in. Going back in. We can do this. And the only reason I'm gonna insist on doing this is because otherwise I'm just gonna keep mistyping things, and that's not gonna be a good time for anybody. So now all it's doing is taking the info it needs from the disk and putting it into memory so that you have a working operating system. All right, we're here. This is Gentoo Linux, kind of, but it's not installed. We're just off. We're just running off the CD right now, and it tells you that right at the top. Welcome to Gentoo Linux minimal installation CD. Let's see. Hopefully, we have internet. Let's see if I can. If we don't have internet, we'll have to make it. We'll have to fix it. Okay, this is great. We have internet. And it told me if Ethernet adapters were detected at boot, they should be auto-configured. So that's the easiest way to do the installation. You are going to need an internet connection. I highly recommend just plugging in the Ethernet. Wi-Fi is awesome, and we can figure that out later. Actually, I'm not going to figure out Wi-Fi. I don't have that on this computer. Um, Although I wonder if we can emulate it in the virtual machine. We'll cross that bridge another day. So ping is just a program that is like an internet thing. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's like calling someone. and it tells you whether or not someone answered. So this is what's gonna happen. Let me try pinging a non-existent IP address. An IP address on the internet is like a phone number in the telephones. Uh, my number pad isn't working. That's weird. 8.1 point. I know that this is not one. And it should eventually tell me that there was no data coming back. So when I pinged Google, you can see up there that the IP address is 172.217. Whatever. I got data back, so I know I'm connected to the internet. Obviously, this IP address, it wasn't giving me anything. All right, so let's go back to the handbook, and I think we're done with chapter one. Chapter one was getting inside the virtual or the installation media. This is optional starting SSH. I usually do this, but we're not going to do that during this installation. So we're just going to move forward. Oh, look at me. I was just jumping ahead, wasn't I? I guess I'm just so excited to show you guys the beautiful world of Linux. I just couldn't resist. But all of chapter 2 is configuring the network. But we already checked the network. It works. It works. Maybe it just works. Oh man, am I sure I didn't write this? I didn't, trust me. I'm not fancy enough. Yes, for us, it just worked. So I think, look at this. They even did the same ping command. Oh my god. Maybe I've installed Gentoo too many times. All right, but here's what's great, and I actually ran into this with the installation on my laptop recently. I couldn't get the Ethernet to work. It, it's a weird ThinkPad, and it doesn't have a built-in port. It had like a dock, but the dock was, I don't know. I had to use Wi-Fi, couldn't figure it out. But with the help of what's in this manual, as well as the community, the Gentoo community, support community over on IRC, we got it set up, and I got my network working. Again, this is on the installation media. So again, highly recommend read the handbook. Um, I would say on this chapter here, like if your network is working, you could probably just skip the rest of this. You're gonna need to know this once you're off the installation media and actually into your actual, installation. You're gonna need to know some of this stuff to get your internet back up and running. But for now, if it works, it works. Rejoice and move on to the next chapter, preparing the disk. Okay, I was hoping I wouldn't get this far today because I'm kind of dreading this chapter due to having to do it all on the command line. But we're going to do it. We are going to do it. So, again, a lot of choices to be made here. Okay, a lot of information. This handbook's going to hold your hand through all of it. It's called LVM Advanced. I guess it is advanced. I guess the easiest way to do it is to just, well, let me think about what we want to talk about next here. All right, let's actually step back over here for a second and talk about what we're looking at. Okay, so you may not believe it, but this is an operating system every bit as much as your Windows 10 installation. Okay, when you boot up your Windows 10, you get actually like it's actually really nice, like pictures, and then you hit spacebar, and then ask for your password. Really pretty. It's all graphical. It's wonderful. But at the end of the day, all the operating system is a way for the user to interact with the computer, and that's what this is giving us as well. It's just not in a graphical way, but rather in a textual way. This is what is commonly referred to as the command line interface, or CLI. I always pronounce it CLI in my head. I don't know if anybody else does. I don't. I've never asked. But again, this is just like your Windows, only instead of using your mouse and the keyboard, we're limited to simply using our keyboard. Okay, but you know, I actually quite enjoy using the command line for most of my work because it's very powerful, and I find myself, you know, doing less guessing and more research when I don't know what to do on the command line. Maybe I'll be able to demonstrate that a little bit as we work through this. So one of the things I actually wanted to check. Uh, oh, and so what is the command line? So in the command line, what you do is you execute commands. Okay, for example, ping is a command, and we used the ping command earlier. If you don't know what a command does, you can open the manual. MAN is short for manual. That's another command, and that command takes an argument. Okay, and so this is telling the operating system execute the manual command, and if I do that, oh, not found. That hurt. Ooh, that really hurt. All right, we're gonna have to wait for this whole command line intro, I think, until we're in the actual operating system. But at the very least, if you have a command that is installed on your system, 99.9% of the time, you can get a little bit of help on what it does by typing two dashes and then the word help. Okay, the dashes is just a very common way that programmers program their applications to accept additional input from the user. This is saying additional input, give me some help, and there's all the help now. We can't read all of that. Unfortunately, it got scrolled off screen, and I actually don't know how to scroll back in one of these things. Is my mouse? Look at it. My mouse is actually working in here, but the scroll doesn't do anything. Um, so what you can do, and what's really helpful, if you put a vertical bar here, that's telling the operating system take the output from the first command and feed it directly into the next command. So there's another command in the Linux world. Every Linux installation, I think it's almost necessary, has a program called less. And what that is just a program that lets you scroll text. Okay. So this is taking the output from ping and piping it. That vertical bar is called a pipe into the less program. So now we can. Why can't I go up? Man, I'm really having a hard go of this today. What about more? That's another one. That didn't do nothing. All right, I think we're really gonna skip all the command line tutorials until we get into our actual operating system. I'm obviously doing something wrong here. One thing I wanted to check though, uh, I wonder, I thought that they might have had. They don't. Okay, I thought maybe there was a graphical interface to the live CD, but it actually doesn't look like. Okay, I I told y'all this was live. Okay, this is unscripted, so just bear with me as we go through this. So what are we doing now? Preparing the disks. So like I said, I have like a 40 gigabyte hard drive attached to this virtual machine, but the hard drive is blank. There's nothing on it. Um, and the way hard drives work is they need to have a mm, partition table, maybe. They need a few pieces of information because whenever the operating system goes to interact with the hard drive, it needs to know, how is the information on the hard drive structured and how can I get to the different pieces of information on there. Okay, so the first bit of information, how's it structured, I think is what they talk about here in this section, partition tables. What is this block devices? Mm, okay, yeah, this is talking about interesting stuff. Again, read it. Um, Partition tables. So how is it structured? I think this is probably the old way of doing it. I think this is probably the new way of doing it. Don't forget to read. Here are a few caveats. One cannot do. Yeah, look, if you want to dual boot with Windows, um, there's gonna be some fancy stuff. Like if you want to dual boot, the installation is a little bit more complicated, especially if you're putting it all on one hard drive. Not impossible, not insurmountable, and not, I would say, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 by any means. But it is going to be a little bit more challenging, and so you want to make sure you pay attention to these sorts of things. We're not doing LVM, we're not doing RAID. In fact, uh, here it talks about a partitioning scheme. How do we want to? So after you tell the OS, here's how the data is organized, what GPT or MPT or whatever. You tell it, is it split up into sections, or is the drive partitioned? So in Windows, you might have a C drive, a D drive, an E drive, and those could be three different hard drives, right? So three different physical drives, or you could have one terabyte hard drive split into three different segments: 50 gigabytes, 50 gigabytes, 900 gigabytes. That's the same thing that we're doing here. It's just that rather than C drive, D drive, it's designated differently in Linux. I think what I'm going to do, just to keep things a little bit simpler here, is just put it all on one partition. Now, I don't usually do that. At the very least, what I like to do is split out my home partition. Where is that? Swap, system, BIOS. Oh, they don't even split it out here. I like to at least split out my home partition from everything else. So that, again, if we're thinking about Windows, it would be like splitting out, is it my documents? I guess my documents from everything else. And the reason being that if something catastrophic were to happen to the OS itself and that part of the hard drive gets corrupted, or if I have to reinstall the OS, very, very rare. Very, very rare. Okay, on Linux. I've only ever had to reinstall because I messed up. um, but since all of my personal information, my music, my documents, what have you, my pictures, I have it on a separate partition. I don't have to worry about losing that or moving it or whatever. I can just wipe the partition that has the OS and then reinstall. But I think we're just going to keep things simple here for these tutorials. What is the BIOS boot? Yeah, we're going to skip all this. Default user partition to disk. All right, so this is going to walk us through all this stuff. I'm gonna need some of these. I'm gonna need some of these commands. All right, so let's go back to our live CD, and I think if we do the fdisk -l, it's gonna show us all the disks. Why is it showing me so many disks? Let's see. We got the live CD, the CD-ROM. I need to figure out which one of these. And why is this typing? Oh, look, now the pipe is working like expected. So fdisk is showing me all the disks. Why are there so many here? I only attached one. Oh, this is all the RAM stuff. I think this is all stuff having to do with live CD. I'm gonna ignore dev RAM slash dev RAM slash dev RAM. Looks something familiar. Oops. All right, VDA. So how do we read this output? So just so you can see the command, and this is really helpful if you don't know. Um, if you hit up, the up arrow, it goes through all the previous commands that you've entered. And then also if you hit tab, it'll try to autocomplete. So I'm gonna hit tab here on the D. It'll try to autocomplete your command. I know because I've used it before that the -L to fdisk means to list. Okay, if I run fdisk with nothing, it's telling me that I made an error. I can look at the help, but I already know. Well, let's go ahead and look at that help. I said I was gonna wait on this, didn't I? Oops. Fdisk help. So here, I can see all the information that fdisk is trying to tell me. So at the top, a small description of what it does: display or manipulate a disk partition table. So from the handbook, we're actually going to be using a command called parted to do the partitioning, but you can actually do it with fdisk if you want. You can do that. Anywho, under here, under options, if you scroll down, let's see, we got four, that first four sets, and then the very next one, so the dash L or dash dash list, either one of those does the same thing. What it does over to the right, display, partitions, and exit. So that's what we want. I want to figure out which, what does the live CD call the physical drive that I want to install my operating system on, because that's what I need to do work on next. All right. So again, fdisk-l, down here at the bottom if you're following along, piping that into the less program so we can scroll. And then I'm just gonna hit page down this time. So the output here is, I guess we'll call it paragraphs. Each paragraph starts with the word disk, and that next sequence of strings with the forward slash, that's an actual file. And so something interesting about Linux is that everything is a file. I don't know how Windows does it, but in Linux, I know that everything is a file, including any hard drive. That was the decision, the choice that was made by the kernel developers of how they wanted to tie any hardware into user space. Everything is tied together by way of a file mechanism. So any hard drive has an appropriate file on the, mm, I guess, in the OS that can be accessed in order to interact with that hard drive. So when it says slash dev, again, and I'm going to keep referring to Windows because I assume that most people are familiar with how stuff works there. But let's say that you wanted to look up a file in the Windows Explorer. It has a path associated with it, usually starting with, I guess always starting with a drive letter, for example, C, then a colon, then a slash, and then some combination of alphanumeric characters. Actually, I think Windows lets you put spaces in there. And then anytime there's a backslash, it's kind of it's separating a folder from another folder and another folder. Linux is similar, except that everything is based off of what's called the root file or the root directory, which is just a forward slash. Everything in the OS starts from the root or the forward slash. Uh, so in fact, I'm going to back out of this for a minute. One of the commands that pretty much use all the time is ls. It stands for list. I'm going to list the contents of the root directory here. And you can see here I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, like 18 directories is what it's showing me here. Some of those might be files. I think the colors mean something. So there's, what did I say, 18 folders and or directories in the root folder. I can actually list the contents of any of those. ls/home, that's empty. ls/dev, that's got a bunch of stuff in there. Dev stands for device. Okay, I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure this is where all the hardware files that we were talking about earlier are located. So if we go back to our output from fdisk, you can see here /dev, so a device, RAM1. There's some sort of RAM associated hard drive. I don't know how live CDs work, okay, but that's all weird stuff. If we scroll to the very bottom, we'll see /dev/VDA. That's 50 gigabytes. I guess I was wrong. I made it 50. That's my actual hard drive. That's where I'm going to be doing my installation. The rest of this data is probably useful, units and sectors and stuff. I don't really know what it means, so I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so we know /dev/VDA, that's what we're aiming for. Let's flip back to the handbook for a second, and I'm hoping this is legible. I've zoomed in at 140 here. Maybe I should go in a little deeper. I'm going to go in a little deeper. I just really want you guys to be able to see this. The parted application offers a simple interface. Yes, it does. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Parted-A optimal. I don't know what this A does. I trust the handbook, so I could just do this blindly. But let's go in and check what that flag does, just so we can educate ourselves. And then here, where it says /dev/sda, we have to use the disk that we found earlier. Okay, so we're gonna go back to our live CD. Let's look at, what do we say, parted. I want to see what that -a is for. Okay, they're near the top. -a align. Alignment for new partition. It can be none. It can be sil, min, or opt. Okay. I guess it's going to be optimally aligned. Y'all remember what this was? /dev/bga. Cancel. fdisk-l /dev/vda. All right. So now, look at that. So our prompt changed. Notice that instead of saying live CD squiggly hashtag, now it says parentheses parted. That's so whoever wrote the parted program, that's that programmer's way of telling you, hey, you're in my program now. You are not in your command line interface. You're in my program. So this is akin to double clicking on an icon on your desktop and then a window pops up. We're in that window, except it's all text based. And it's actually pretty helpful. It says welcome. That's pretty nice. And then it tells us to type in help if we want to view a list of commands. I'm not going to do that because, you're welcome to explore those commands if you want. I'm pretty much going to just do what the handbook tells me here. So let's see what we have in here next. Oh, look at this. Very handy. Now, keep in mind, I'm starting with 50 gigabytes of blank hard drive. Okay. So I'm not worried at all about losing data. If you have a 1 terabyte disk and you're only using 200 gigabytes of it and you want to slice out 500, 100, hell, you could probably do it on 50 gigabytes like I am, to, play around and mess with Linux. 100% doable, 100% fine. That's how I started with Linux as well, but you're going to need to be careful when you're messing with your disk, okay? One of the reasons I started using Linux full time was I was messing with my disks and I deleted my Windows. Don't be that guy. Don't be me. Um, so heed the warnings, y'all. Again, the handbook's super helpful. Read these sections carefully, especially if you have data you don't want to lose. Hell, if you have data you don't want to lose, back it up, okay? Or go buy another hard drive. Anywho, Um, I'm just going to be following this mostly word for word. So make label GPT. Again, it explains earlier what GPT means, and you do have a choice here whether you want to do GPT or something else. Boom. That was easy. That was actually very easy. Let's see. Removing all partitions. We don't have to do this. Ours was already blank. All right, now we're going to create partitions. Unit mib. I think I know what that means, but I don't really care. I just know I have to do it. Unit mib. There's a difference between a mib and a megabyte. I don't really know what it is. Something about 1,000 versus 1,024 maybe. But now I'm not going to do all this nonsense. I'm just going to format the whole thing. I hope that doesn't come back to bite us. I really do. So I'm just going to do make part. Should we do swap? No, I'm going to do a swap file later. Make part primary. What's your first one? 1, -1. All right. Make part primary 1, -1. Here we go. Make part means make a partition. Primary means it's a primary partition. I think if you're not doing GPT, then I think you're limited to 4 primary partitions. It's not that bad because any one of those primary partitions can have numerous what they call logical. Is it logical? I think logical partitions underneath it. I don't know what the difference has something to do with where the information about the partition is stored. With the master boot record MBR, there's only a little sliver of space reserved at the beginning of the drive for the partition table, and that sliver of space can only hold enough information for 4. But once you've made your first partition, and that partition is what, uh, a gigabyte, 2 gigabytes, 3 gigabytes, whatever, but large, it's going to reserve some space at the beginning of that partition where you can also then re-sub-partition it, if you will, based on however large it is. Anyways, primary partition, so I say 1, -1. Okay, right, ls list. That's not what I'm. Help. Make label print. All right, so if I hit print, it's telling me I have starts at 1, ends there. I don't know if I'm using up the whole thing. I think I'm using the whole thing. I'm gonna go with yes. All right, let's go back over here to the handbook. I think we're gonna make. Oh, they named it root fs. I think that's optional. We're just gonna do it anyways. Name one root fs. So if you're following the handbook, your steps here might be a little different, especially if you're gonna go into a separate home partition, which I recommend. So again, educate yourself, read what's on the page, ask questions in IRC if you need to. I'll show you how to get into IRC, I think maybe a little bit later, because I want to focus on this installation right now. But right now, we're just going to go with that. Let's see, set to boot on. All right, this is actually very important. Step 1, boot on, print. Notice the difference, okay, from the print command earlier and the print command now. The only difference in the very last column, it has flags. Well, I guess the name, we changed the name as well, didn't we? It got changed from primary to root fs. The the name change was optional, but this will help us in the future if we're, trying to do any maintenance. We'll know what that partition is. The flag is important because the BIOS won't know that it can boot from it unless it has the boot flag enabled. So that step's actually very important. The way the handbook is doing it, since they have a separate boot partition, they only made that partition bootable. But since we're just writing everything to the drive, no partitions, we have to make sure it's bootable there. All right. Use quit command. So I think the last. So here's look. I've told you. You can do it with fdisk if you want. I think because we're getting up to 48 minutes now. The last thing we're gonna do here today is write a file system onto our partition. So we're gonna skip through all this. It's all the same stuff, just using fdisk instead of parted. All right. What is a file system? It's gonna read. Tell you a little bit about it there. Um, this is pretty much what everyone uses, I think. They used to say don't use that for your boot, I think, but nowadays I think it's fine. There's some other fancy stuff. This is Windows VFAT and NTFS. I wouldn't use these for the system installation at least. Some of these other ones are fancy for other reasons. I don't bother. I just go with ext4, extended 4, extended journal 4. Okay, so let's go back to, so what's our command? Make file system dot ext4 dash t small. I don't know what the dash t does. Scene. All right. So now we can quit. So that's one of the important things to understand about parted, and that's one of the nice things about fdisk. Anything you do in parted, it's done. If you delete, it's gone. Like it doesn't ask you to save. It just does it. That's why you have to be careful. In fdisk, at least, you may need to update. Yeah, I know. In fdisk, it does everything in memory and then asks you to confirm before it does it physically. And so there's a little bit of a buffer there. What were we doing again? I wanted to look at makefs.ext4. Let's see if it has any help here. They wanted us. Oh, what is dash T usage type? See it near the bottom there. This documentation is not great, is it? That's a shame. Dash T small. Okay. Do you tell me up here what that means? You don't. Again, I trust the handbook writers, so we're going with this. And so here's one more thing we're going to want to do. Let's run our fdisk command again. Okay, and notice how now at the bottom I have /dev/vda, and then at the very, very bottom I have /dev/vda1. So the VDA, that's the actual drive, that's the whole hard drive. All right, but I can't write a file system to the whole hard drive. I have to write my file system to a partition on the hard drive. And so that's what fdisk is showing me here, is that the first partition is the file /dev/vda1. If you had made multiple partitions, you'd have multiple files there. So make fs dash ext4 dash t small dash dev/vda1. Writing superblocks and file system accounting information. Done. That took a while. I guess it's a big thing. Okay. I think we're nearing the end of our first episode, y'all. I mean, we're 52 minutes in, but we did it. We made it ext4, and so now, hell, I think even in Windows 10, we'll see this hard drive now. It's not blank anymore. It's got a partition table, and it's got a file system on it. It is usable now, which is awesome. Activating the swap partition. I don't want to do this right now. Do I need swap for the installation? I'll come back to y'all on that. Mounting the root partition. What's next? Installing stage 3. Okay. We're going to stop there for today. I thought that was fun. If you enjoyed it, let me know. I don't care if you didn't, because I'm going to keep doing this until we're done with the installation. Thank you for tuning in. If you did, in fact, tune in. See you next time.